In the bustling heart of Neo City, where glimmering towers reached for the smog-covered sky, life thrived under the watchful eyes of countless surveillance drones. These metallic hawks glided silently overhead, capturing every moment of the citizens' lives. Some might have found it oppressive, but Milo, a code monitor by trade and a rebel by inclination, had learned to live with it, at least until it nearly got him killed. Milo had a way of making the mundane amusing. Every day at the Bureau of Data Integrity, he'd spin wild tales about the algorithms he processed. "Look at these numbers," he'd quip to his colleagues. "If they were any more linear, we'd have to start calling them spaghetti." Laughter would bubble through the sterile cubicles, and for a moment, they'd forget the constant hum of the drones overhead. They'd forget that their lives were scripted in ones and zeros. But one particularly dull Tuesday, while juggling his caffeine addiction and his wry sense of humor, Milo discovered something unusual. As he sifted through the endless stream of data, a glitch caught his eye. It wasn't a mere error, it was a suspicious spike, a telltale sign that someone was plotting to challenge the regime. Instead of sending an alert, he leaned back in his chair and grinned. "Guys, I think we've got ourselves a rebel. Who wants to place bets on how long before they're vaporized?" His colleagues chuckled, but the laughter quickly faded as the seriousness of the situation set in. Unbeknownst to him, the rebellion he was joking about was merely a front for his own misadventure, a coding experiment that had accidentally gone live, turning Milo himself into the target of a government manhunt. By lunchtime, the news broke. The government's propaganda screens, which usually showcased the latest in tech advancements and celebrity endorsements, suddenly flashed the ominous words, "Rebel alert, suspect code name Milo. Approach with extreme caution." "Oops," he muttered under his breath, as the world outside his office turned into a scene from a horror film. Citizens froze in their tracks, eyes glued to the screens, fear rippling through the crowd. Milo's heart raced, but not with fear. With a mix of exhilaration and disbelief, he grabbed his bag, darted for the exit, and realized that he was about to find out just how fast he could run. Navigating the streets felt surreal, as if he were swimming in a sea of chaos. Drones buzzed overhead, their red lights flashing like angry fireflies. Milo ducked into an alley, adrenaline pumping through him. "Okay, this isn't a video game," he thought. "No respawn. Just survival." He sprinted past neon-lit cafes and pop-up kiosks that seemed to mock him with their normalcy. A barista, with a look of shock plastered across her face, dropped a cup of steaming coffee as Milo zipped past. "Hey, watch where you're," she yelled, but he was already gone, his reflection flickering in the glass as he turned the corner. It was then that he bumped into Tessa, an ex-hacker turned conspiracy theorist, who believed the government was using alien technology to control minds. Her wild hair and frayed clothes made her look like a character straight out of a comic book. "Milo, you're on the run?" she exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Finally. This is it. You're the chosen one." "Chosen for what?" he asked, breathless. "To save us all. You've got the skills, the courage, oh, and you're pretty cute." Milo couldn't help but laugh. "Cute? I'm pretty sure the drones don't care about looks, Tessa. They just want my head on a platter." As if on cue, a drone word passed, scanning the street. "Quick! In here!" Tessa yanked him into a nearby storage room, filled with dusty old tech and boxes of forgotten gadgets. "We'll plan your epic escape from in here. First, we need a plan. And coffee. Lots of coffee." As they huddled together, a raucous plan unfolded, one involving the elderly members of a secret resistance group known as the Silver Shadows. They were the last generation to remember a time before the drones and the digital chains. Milo found himself laughing at the absurdity of it all. So you're telling me I need to recruit a bunch of seniors with walkers to save the day? Hey, they've got wisdom, and they've lived through worse than this, Tessa shot back, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Before long, Milo, Tessa, and a cadre of unlikely allies, an ex-banker named Fred, who could crack any safe with a spoon, and Marjorie, a sharp-witted grandmother with a penchant for knitting and explosives, were plotting their counterattack. Each member brought a unique skill set to the table, resulting in hilariously ill-conceived plans that somehow always seemed to work. Their first mission: a covert operation to hack into the mainframe during the annual government gala, a black tie affair where the elite flaunted their wealth while the rest of the population cowered beneath the weight of surveillance. Milo envisioned a grand display, but Marjorie suggested they go for undercover grandmas. "Trust me," she said, her knitting needles clacking in rhythm. "Nothing draws less attention than a couple of sweet old ladies with purses full of pastries." With a team assembled, they devised a plan so convoluted that even Milo wasn't sure how it would unfold. The night of the gala arrived, and as the drones hovered above like vultures, the elderly operatives donned their best floral dresses and orthopedic shoes, ready to infiltrate the event. Milo couldn't help but stifle a laugh as he watched Fred practice his grandpa persona, complete with a cane that doubled as a secret weapon. "What's your cover story?" Milo asked, chuckling. "Just tell them I'm looking for my cat," Fred said, gesturing dramatically. "They won't suspect a thing." As the night progressed, chaos erupted. The gala was packed with government officials and tech moguls, all too busy patting each other on the back to notice the motley crew infiltrating their midst. The plan, while ridiculous, began to unfold seamlessly. Tessa managed to sneak into the mainframe room, while Milo provided support via an earpiece, trying to navigate her through security protocols, but as they neared the climax of their operation, everything fell apart. Just as Tessa reached the main terminal, the drones buzzed closer, drawn by a surge of unauthorized data. Milo could almost hear their mechanical shrieks of indignation. "Tessa! Abort! Abort!" he yelled into the mic, but it was too late. She was already knee-deep in code, her fingers flying over the keys. "Just a second," she shouted back, grinning like a kid at a candy store. "This is almost too easy." As the lights flickered ominously, a crowd of elite patrons turned to gawk at the commotion. It was a classic case of what could go wrong, spiraling into glorious absurdity. Milo's heart raced as he realized that what had begun as a simple joke had turned into a life-or-death situation. And then, just as he thought they were finished, Marjorie stepped forward, brandishing her knitting needles like weapons. "Don't worry, boys. I've got this," she shouted, and with a swift motion, she hurled a ball of yarn towards the nearest drone, causing it to short-circuit and crash spectacularly into the punch bowl. In that moment of chaos, laughter erupted. The tension broke, and the attendees, frozen in shock, began to chuckle at the ludicrousness of it all. "Is this part of the entertainment?" one man asked, wiping punch from his suit. Milo seized the opportunity. "You bet it is," he yelled, and within moments, the gala transformed into a full-fledged rebellion. Guests joined in, tossing appetizers and shouting support for the rebel cause. As the drones scrambled to regain control, Milo's team executed their final act, broadcasting the truth behind the surveillance state to the entire city. It wasn't the grand revelation he had envisioned. It was a chaotic mess of laughter, food fights, and a crowd of seniors showing the government what it truly meant to fight back, with the screens flashing the truth and people cheering, Milo felt a swell of hope. The people of Neo City were waking up, and it was all thanks to a bunch of misfits united by a common goal, and a whole lot of humor. As the dust settled and the drones were finally forced to retreat, Milo stood amidst the laughter and applause, realizing that maybe rebellion didn't have to be so serious after all. In that moment, he understood that change could come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, laughter was the best weapon of all, and in a city where shadows loomed large, the brightest lights were often the most unlikely ones. The applause echoed through the gala as Milo stood amidst the chaos, adrenaline coursing through him. Around him, people were still laughing and cheering, caught up in the spirit of defiance that had erupted so unexpectedly. Tessa danced with a plate of pastries, the remnants of the punch bowl creating a sticky, colorful pool at their feet, while Marjorie was busy knitting what appeared to be a makeshift banner that read, "We are watching you." "Look at this!" Tessa yelled, holding up a piece of the gala's digital screen that had flickered and gone dark. "I think I just liberated some priceless tech." "Don't get too cocky," Milo called back, scanning the room for any sign of security or drones regaining control. "We need to get out of here before they figure out what just happened." Just then, Fred came barreling through the crowd, his cane raised like a sword. "I think we might have overdone it," he puffed, breathless but exhilarated. "There are more drones out there than I thought." "Okay, tactical retreat," Milo said, gathering his thoughts. We split into teams. "Tessa, you and Marjorie head for the back exit. Fred and I will distract any remaining drones." "Got it," Tessa responded, tossing a half-eaten pastry in the air and catching it with a flourish. "Let's go, ladies." With a wink and a nod, Tessa and Marjorie darted away, while Milo and Fred moved towards the main entrance, where the chaos had drawn the majority of attention. As they approached, Milo spotted a group of officials frantically trying to restore order, and he couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. "Look at them," he said to Fred, "like ants after you knock over their hill." "Let's give them something to really scramble about," Fred replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Milo nodded, feeling the pulse of the moment. They slipped into a side room filled with decorative plants and even more surveillance equipment. "We need to create a distraction big enough to keep them occupied," Milo said, scanning the room for ideas. Fred, ever the opportunist, grabbed a small control panel off a nearby table. "How about I start pushing buttons? You know how they love their tech." Milo smirked. "That's a terrible idea, but it might just work." Fred's fingers danced over the buttons, and moments later, alarms blared throughout the gala. Red lights began to flash, and an automated voice announced, "Security breach in progress. All personnel to designated safe zones immediately." "Perfect," Milo shouted over the cacophony. "Now let's move." They bolted for the front of the building, where panic had ensued. People were rushing in all directions, a whirlpool of confusion and fear. Milo and Fred weaved through the crowd, their hearts racing. Outside, the scene was no less chaotic. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning for threats, while crowds began to form, some cheering for the rebellion they had just witnessed. The atmosphere was electric, the air thick with possibility. Milo felt a strange sense of empowerment surging through him, as if he had finally stepped into the role he had always imagined for himself. "Where to now?" Fred yelled, his voice barely audible over the din. "Let's head for the alley," Milo shouted back, motioning towards a narrow path alongside the building. "We can regroup and figure out our next move." Once safely tucked away in the shadows, they took a moment to catch their breath. The distant sounds of chaos echoed behind them, the gala transformed into a battleground of ideas and laughter. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Fred asked, his jovial demeanor faltering for the first time since they started their adventure. "They'll have to get through a lot of people first," Milo said, feeling the adrenaline begin to ebb. "Besides, we've sparked something tonight. People won't go back to just sitting idly by." Just then, Tessa and Marjorie emerged from the shadows, their faces flushed with excitement. "You won't believe the scene back there," Tessa gushed. "It was pandemonium. Milo, they were cheering for you," Marjorie added, her knitting momentarily forgotten. "You've become a symbol. They were chanting your name." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Milo said, trying to suppress a grin. "I'm just the guy who accidentally turned the gala into a circus." "Exactly," Tessa exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "You're not just a guy, you're our guy. We need to capitalize on this momentum." Milo considered her words, his mind racing. "You're right. If we can turn this into a rallying cry, we might actually make a difference. But we need a plan. We need to reach the people." Fred chimed in, "We could use social media, but the government controls most of it. We need something grassroots, something they can't shut down easily." Marjorie's eyes sparkled. "What about a flash mob? We gather a crowd and stage our own protest. Something colorful and loud." "Colorful is good," Milo said, already envisioning the vibrant scene. "But we need a message, something clear that can't be ignored." "Freedom," Tessa shouted. "Let's paint the streets with it." "Freedom," Milo echoed, nodding slowly. "Yes. We need to show them that we refuse to be controlled. We'll take to the streets and make our stand." As the group began brainstorming ideas, they sketched out plans for the flash mob. They'd gather supporters from social networks, using Tessa's connections and Fred's charm to spread the word. Marjorie insisted on bringing her knitting, turning it into a tapestry of protest that would flow through the streets like a river of rebellion. With each detail hashed out, Milo felt a wave of excitement wash over him. "This could actually work," he said, unable to contain his smile. "We're really going to do this." The night turned into a whirlwind of activity as they split up to gather supplies and rally more support. Milo found himself rushing through the streets of Neo City, adrenaline propelling him forward. Everywhere he looked, the city was alive with possibilities. Hours later, they reconvened at a central park where their crowd began to form. The atmosphere was electric, people of all ages and backgrounds joining in, drawn by the promise of change and the lure of freedom. As they stood together, Milo felt a deep sense of camaraderie. They were no longer just misfits or rebels, they were a movement, ready to make their voices heard. The flash mob erupted into dance and song, vibrant banners waving above their heads, each one bearing messages of defiance. "Freedom is ours," they shouted, their voices ringing through the air, drowning out the sound of the drones that still patrolled the skies. Milo took a moment to soak it all in, the laughter, the energy, the undeniable spirit of resistance that filled the park. It was a moment he would never forget. Just as they reached a crescendo, the drones above began to circle closer, their sensors focused intently on the gathering. Milo's heart raced. The government would not let this go unchallenged. "Stay strong," he yelled, rallying the crowd. "We're here for each other, and we will not back down." Suddenly, a voice crackled through the loudspeakers. "This gathering is illegal. Disperse immediately, or face consequences." The crowd responded with laughter and chants, a wave of defiance washing over them. Milo could see the fear in some faces, but mostly there was determination. They wouldn't let fear dictate their actions any longer. Let's show them what we're made of. Milo shouted, igniting the spirit of the crowd even further. Together, we can't be silenced. With that, they erupted into a chant, a rhythm that reverberated through the streets. The sound was powerful, an anthem of hope and rebellion that surged through the air like a shockwave. As the drones descended, Milo felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment of truth. Would they be able to stand their ground? The drones unleashed a flurry of blinding lights, but the crowd stood firm, a united front of vibrant humanity against the stark, cold technology. And just when it seemed the government would overpower them, a miracle happened. The elderly members of the Silver Shadows stepped forward, their wisdom and defiance radiating through the air. We lived through your fear. We will not let you take this moment from our children. Marjorie's voice rang out clear, her knitting needles raised like a sword. With that, the crowd roared, a wave of energy washing over them, reinforcing their resolve. Milo looked around, feeling an overwhelming sense of unity as he joined in the chants, his voice mingling with thousands of others. Freedom! 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 And in that moment, beneath the swirling lights and the watchful eyes of the drones, they became something greater than themselves. They were a force, a tidal wave of hope against an oppressive regime. As the chants echoed through the streets, Milo realized that this was only the beginning. They were no longer alone, they were part of something much larger, a movement fueled by laughter, rebellion, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. As the night deepened, and the city hummed with the energy of change, Milo knew one thing for certain: they would not go back to living in the shadows. Together, they would march into the future, determined to reclaim their freedom, one laugh and one protest at a time.